Hey everybody, Elliot Williams, Managing Editor of Hackaday. Welcome, welcome. Mike Stitch is Editor-in-Chief of Hackaday by day and an orchestra musician by night. While understandably most famous for his tricky last name, he's proven himself by shepherding Hackaday into the juggernaut that it is today, and by coding up a fantastic one-pixel Pac-Man clone that runs the original algorithms in an RGB matrix. It's really awesome. Today he's going to give us a peek behind the curtain, an overview of the past year in Hackaday, and a glimpse into what we're planning for the year ahead for the greatest hardware hacking community on Earth. That's y'all. Please welcome to the Hackaday Superconference stage, Mike Stitch.
Thank you very much. My name is Mike Stitch. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Hackaday. And it's my pleasure to be here at SuperCon speaking with you about what has happened over the past year, what Hackaday is all about right now, and what we're going to see moving forward. When Elliot introduced me, he said, I'm going to give you a peek behind the curtain, but that's really not true. There is no curtain. The great thing about Hackaday is that we draw everything from the community itself. When we're looking for new writers, we look to hire within the community itself. I was a reader of Hackaday long before I was ever a writer or an editor, and everyone can say the same thing. It's an amazing way to kind of feel the pulse of what's going on and to keep up with it. And as far as our guiding ideals, nothing can come, you can't pull everything from a small group of people. You need this pollination of ideas, the same sorts of things that we preach for adding a hardware team, adding a software team to your project. One person just can't do it all. You need a support structure there. And the great thing about the Hackaday community is whenever we have a time of need, whenever we're going to fall flat on something, whenever we need a great idea, there is always somebody there, and usually many people there, willing to give that help and to guide us forward. And that's why we've had so many great years of success. I believe we're in our 13th year right now. And I can barely remember what the last year has been like. There's so much going on at Hackaday right now. And so for me to look back and make this talk was a real treat myself. I have a big number to share with you that I think is appropriate to start with. We just passed 256,000 registered users on Hackaday IO. Now, Hackaday IO is our community platform, so what we're looking for there is when you build something, this is a great place to document it for yourself. It becomes an open platform for other people to learn from that. But you can really do whatever you want with this, and we see a ton of people going beyond just project builds and actually doing initiatives. And I'll get to some of that in a little bit as well. We embody some of the highest ideals of those of expanding human knowledge. And we want to make that available to all through platforms like Hackaday.io. In 2017, to kind of empower the great community of Hackaday, we poured on our live events. I want to go through some of those with you. We started off earlier in the year with World Create Day. I believe this is our second year of World Create Day. Basically, we're saying, get together with some other people, think about some things that might be causing problems or could be better in the world, and see if you can come up with an idea and see what projects come out of that. We had over 70 different locations organized by community members. A lot of them were hackathons where they didn't just talk about the ideas, but they said, let's actually see if we can build and implement some of this stuff and see if it becomes a further project. A lot of these became team Hackaday Prize entries this year, and we just love doing this. I'd love to see all of the feedback and the events that happen all around the world. And in conjunction with this, we organized 3 Hackaday Unconferences on the same day. Now, this is rapidly becoming my favorite way to do live events. So a conference like this, there's a lot of pressure to put on a polished, well-rehearsed, well-thought-out talk like the one that I'm giving right now. And that's kind of a disincentive for talking about things that you haven't totally figured out yet, that you're like super excited about and maybe feel like you're not the expert on yet. And so requiring people to commit to a proposal several months in advance and then have a slide deck, you lose out on the buzz that's going on right now. So the Unconference says, come to this conference, you're expected to be able to stand and give 7 minutes on something that you're excited about right now. And the way we've kind of developed into it is everyone comes in, we have them write their name and their topic and a little bit more information about it on a Post-it note, and we put it up, and we have someone emceeing, and we'll just pull off a note and say, John's up now, and Sarah's on deck, and we go through the day like that. We saw an amazing amount of people speak in this one day in our locations at San Francisco, over in the Design Lab here in Los Angeles, and then Pumping Station 1 in Chicago. Anybody from Pumping Station 1? Yeah? Opened their doors, and we really packed that place. In fact, we were way over capacity on any single room, so we split into 3 groups, I think, in the morning, and then 2 groups. So we actually had concurrent talk tracks going at this event. It was completely unbelievable. The other thing is, because you don't know what people are going to say or bring, it becomes really awesome to see what happens. So if you were outside last night, did anybody stay for the High Voltage Destruction Fest last night? So I was walking back at like 12:30 in the morning, and I was like 2 blocks away, and I heard this huge cheer go up, and I'm like, oh my God, that's us. Interrupting the whole neighborhood. So Will, the guy who's doing that, was at the Unconference in Chicago, and he came up and he's like, hey, can I do a demonstration with fire during dinner? And I'm like, absolutely, you can. We'll find some. He's like, I need a blowtorch. I'm like, great. So he was doing single-cell injectors. He wants to do biohacking, and he's like, these aren't readily available, or at least under my budget. And he's like, so I've been working on a way to make them myself. And he was melting glass pipettes in order to make single-cell injectors. This is, telling people we want to know what you're excited about right now is a great way to see the trends in things right now. We also did our 4th annual meetup at the Bay Area Maker Faire. This has gotten huge, and we did actually spill over into the street and other bars and restaurants in that area. Don't let this discourage you from coming. You should totally come because it clears out a little bit by the end of the night, but it was packed. And we saw things, these are people who maybe were working a booth the entire day, and now that Maker Faire's added Friday, like they've been on their feet saying the same thing for 2 days, and yet 7 or 8 o'clock at night rolls around, and they're still like, let's go out to the bar and hang out with the Hackaday crowd. I remember seeing a person who's like bootstrapping SDR, receiver, transmitter pair. They're, I don't know, I'm blanking on all the stuff that was there. Amazing hardware that was there. I remember a guitar, some other stuff. Catch me later, I'm sure it'll come up. And Tindy actually hosted that, co-hosted that with us this year. I've been to a couple of different events where Tindy has a booth and is having all the Tindy sellers come up, and it's amazing to see people that have known each other, maybe talked through the Tindy community that are meeting for the first time. They have a really tight community of their own, and if you're making hardware, if you have some unique hardware, Tindy is a great place to sell it, and there's a good support structure there, so look into that. We've had similar meetups like this Banff meetup at Scale and DEF CON and Maker Faire New York. Basically, any other event that we're not organizing, there's still a ton of Hackaday community there, so it's nice if we can host some kind of event where people can find each other. In August, we had the Eclipse Viewing. Now, this is like a personal favorite of mine. I actually didn't know the eclipse was happening until like January when Dan Maloney, one of our writers, was like, hey, this eclipse is happening. And I think it's amazing because it has this like thread back through human history of like, we didn't used to know what happened. Like all of a sudden it would get dark and you'd be like, oh my God, what is that? And so we went from not knowing to kind of knowing, then to be able to do the math and astronomy to predict it. And now we're to the point where you can do like serious citizen science on this. There's a great article Dan wrote on a gentleman who was measuring or proving the speed of light, proving gravitation. I can't remember exactly what he was proving, but the gravity of the sun can actually pull photons as they go around it, but you usually can't measure it because the sun's so bright you can't see those dim photons. So when you have a total solar eclipse, it blocks out the sun's light, but you can see light coming from behind it, and you should be able to measure how that light bends. And that was just a guy who's like, I've looked a lot into this, I'm going to find out what this is, and I think that says a lot about the availability of information, the availability of people to learn, and then to build hardware and to acquire test tools that previously would have been closed off to almost everyone. Also, so we had a huge number of community organizing view parties. I think we had like 300 of them come in. So amazing outpouring. I'm glad people did that. The actual path of totality should be like from Oregon down to South Carolina. But you can see people are like, I don't care if it's not totality, I'm still going to watch the eclipse, which I thought was cool. And this picture is from Meehan Crater in Idaho. It's a extinct volcano in the rim of the crater. And if you watch the video Dan was recording, the spontaneous gasps and the just excitement that comes out at totality is really crazy. But also you can see the shadow coming for you across the landscape because they're up really high. It's pretty cool. Check it out. Going on with the unconferences that we had earlier in the year, we organized one in the UK, and it got out of control. So we ended up having 150 people packed into this theater. We had over 300 people on the wait list. We were like, okay, we should do another event for the people that couldn't be there, so we organized a meetup at a bar the night before, like a Bring a Hack. And like I was saying before about Willa and the pipettes, it's amazing what people bring with them and who you get to talk to. So I met this woman named Rachel and at the meetup on Friday night, and she had all kinds of really cool wearables, like blinky stuff that was interactive, that was just like different than I'd ever seen. I talked to her a bunch about it that night, and it was awesome. And then the next day, she came and did her talk, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm doing my PhD, and part of that is that we're 3D printing eyeballs. And I'm like, why did I waste my time talking about your blinky wearables when I could have been talking about 3D printed eyeballs? So it's just amazing to see the people that come out for that. We saw some autonomous driving, sensors and how they're being used. We saw making for education. Pretty much every topic that you can imagine in the hacking world is there, but you start to see these trends of what is going on. So we're going to be organizing more of these unconferences. Make a point to go to them. They're fantastic. And don't be afraid to speak. I think that's another great thing about this is like if you're having to submit a proposal for a talk at a conference like this and polish your speech and have a deck, a lot of people who haven't had a lot of speaking opportunities completely shy away from that. So far, we haven't had a single person who like refuses to speak. We're like, hey, get up and do a minute, get up and say, you know, I programmed my first microcontroller last week and I came to find out what everyone else is doing. It really is empowering to get up and be like, yeah, everyone's nodding their head and they're like, I was there too, it's fine. We have this big imposter syndrome in our community where people are like, oh my gosh, Sammy Kamkar is so amazing, he can do all this stuff. But even he in his own talks will be like, I don't have a huge background in hardware before I started doing this stuff, and I had to depend on everyone else. Everyone has the same kind of creation story in that stuff, and getting people up on stage to talk for the first time unlocks them actually sharing the breakthroughs that they're doing, which tells the story that you can do it too, which makes it easier to join the community. Love it. And of course, the Superconference. So I made this slide and the notes for it before I got here, and I was going to be like, this is so amazing because Superconference has really taken off. We had over 140 talk proposals, and they were all incredibly good. I'm a horrible gambler, and I was like trying to choose talks, and I'm like, this is like gambling. Like, which one of these are great, and which ones of them are just really good? So if we could have added 2 more halls, I'm sure we could have filled them with talks that you would have loved. But we are a little space limited. But I think that's a great success. We also saw tickets sell out really fast. We saw sponsors that were just beating down our door to get in because they share the ideals of the community. I think it's really great. So I thought about all that before I got here, and then I got here and I'm like, oh my God, this thing has legs of its own. I mean, looking at legs of its own. Who was at Friday Night Badge Hacking over at the Supply Frame offices? So was there anywhere to sit? I mean, like almost immediately. We had people that were showing up a half an hour to 90 minutes before the badge hacking was supposed to start. So by the time we actually opened the doors, every single seat in like 3 rows of a big room were filled. We had people sitting in the eating areas, out on the patio, doing badge hacking, bringing their own hardware. I saw Kenneth Finnegan there with his Raspberry Pi cluster, and I think we ended up having to kick people out at the end of the night because it was getting so late. And that's just been amplified as we got here yesterday. Badge hacking has been full the entire time. I've seen people building 3D printer with the badge. I saw an amazing binocular virtual reality last night, which was incredible. Make sure you stick around till the badge hacking presentation night because it's going to be amazing. So Superconference is incredible, and I really put that on you, the people who come, the people who take the time to do demos and hack badges and be part of this community, and of course, all the people that present and the staff that make it happen. What we have is special, and I just really want to take a moment to mention that. So one of my pleasures of this talk is that I get to go over some of what we've covered over the past year, and we see a ton of trends. I stood up here last year and said that I think we have a big wave of security problems about to hit us, and boy, did we ever this year. So we actually, one week, had so many security articles run that we ran a newsletter just on the security run articles that we ran. So if you don't get the weekly Hackaday.com newsletter, you should. There's a sign up in the footer, Hackaday.com. And then there's also a bi-weekly Hackaday.io newsletter, which if you have an account on Hackaday.io, make sure your email address is up to date, and you'll get that one. But I just picked out one. I could have picked out 40. Brian did a nice treatment of WPA2 being broken. And I think that was number 4 on security articles for the week. I'm a little worried about the hole we've dug for ourselves on hardware that's already out in the field, but that's a whole nother talk. We don't just cover what's broken, though, so we like to try and get some material out there that helps people kind of learn how to look at these problems and deal with them. Ellie did a great article on two-factor authentication. Everyone thinks to themselves, oh, I set up two-factor authentication. I have the authenticator on my phone. We're going to be just fine. And he talks about a little bit of the fallacy there, where some of the issues might be. Pedro Umbolino has been doing a ton of amazing coverage. He's a security researcher in Lisbon, Portugal. And so helping us give context of the news as it comes out, because oftentimes the wider media is just scratching the surface, and when you go to look at the actual reports themselves, they might be beyond your depth. And then he's gone and looked at some tools too, so he did a great one on public key cryptography and how that works. It's a good primer. We like to look at some of the current event stories, and like I said, if the wider media is just scratching the surface, we like to try and add some context, tell you why it matters, and then get input from people that are looking at it. Adam Fabio looked at the U.S. Embassy mysterious illnesses that were in the news a couple months ago, and then tried to figure out, like, what could this possibly be technologically? Like, there's all kinds of this weird information, and went into the microwave auditory effect. Check that one out. We don't limit it to current events, so we like to look into the near and far future and see what kind of things might be possible with the technology that we have now. Very Sid Mead, of course. Sid Mead's the only Sid Mead, but like looking forward and kind of seeing what the predictions are for the current technology, what we could actually make happen. And this one is from Steve Dufresne, who was looking at what would it be like to live on Mars. And the biggest shocker for me is Earth ground on Martian soil doesn't work. I had no idea that that was an issue, but the way that the soil just doesn't conduct electricity the way that our soil does. He also talked about like radiation shielding. So if you're going to live there, you're probably going to have to bury the habitats. And so when you bury the habitats, then you have a communication problem. How do you communicate between habitats? Went into some of the food issues, really fascinating stuff. And we continue to feature interesting hardware. So if you have a product coming out and you're really excited about it, we'd love to hear it. We respect press embargoes. I think it's fitting to put this board up. We saw kind of the first open source silicon, so you can actually look at what's designed inside of your chip. I think that's something that's really interesting to have out there. You can buy this chip, use it on your board, and we hope to see more of that and cover more of that as we move into the future. And then this is one of my favorites. I love Joe Kim's art. I hope you saw his talk yesterday. If not, it's been recorded. But Jenny List, a fantastic contributing editor at Hackaday, came and said, you know, this thing, this Amazon Echo, our crowd shouldn't like it. Like, it's like listening to you and collecting data on you and like all the stuff that people are generally really paranoid about. But then there's this paradox where they've made it open enough that you can hack on it and build your own things on it. And so she went and looked at it, like, how do you balance that? I really want this functionality. They built cool things, and I'm going to be somewhat okay with them, you know, perhaps listening to me and sending things back to servers. So looking at kind of the impact of that. We do really love the hacks, and so Mike Osman and Dominic Spill actually showed this slide yesterday. This video showed up, and it's a gentleman with a piece of paper with slots cut out and like a Bic lighter, and he's just waving the paper. And we looked at it and we're like, huh, that's interesting. It was kind of written from the like, could this really be a thing? And like everyone called it out fake. And then one of our other writers, and we do this all the time, like internally we're having these debates. One of our other writers, Adil Malik, is like, hey, you know, yeah, it's probably fake, but I think it could maybe also be true. And he's like, can I write an article on this? And I'm like, well, how would you do that? He's like, well, I'm going to go and research it and give it a try. And then he came back with this article. I couldn't figure out how to like scroll an article. So like this is just the different panes, and you can see it goes off the side there, and there was even a little bit more. So he came back and he's like, he's like, I did all the testing that I could. I tried with like a bunch of different receivers, and he actually proved that it could be true. You can get something out that's kind of getting that 38 kilohertz carrier wave. It's probably not good enough to get usable data. But the whole time he's doing this, I'm like, am I going to end up with some kind of like toy ray gun that has a wheel on the front of it, and when you pull the trigger, it lights it flicks a big lighter, and then the wheel spins as fast as it can, and it shuts your TV off? Because I really want that. I think it'd be hilarious if people came over to your house and you pulled that thing out, and you're like, oh, let me shut this off so we can have a conversation. Someday, it's a challenge. And then just maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, our writer, Sean Boyce, who is in Vietnam, put out this article. And so we were trying to kind of brainstorm what articles he could be working on. And I'm like, well, I think the really interesting thing is that the majority of our readers haven't been to Vietnam. A lot of people don't think about it as like a big electronics market. So I actually did a really cool talk on the electronics markets that they do have there. But then he said, hey, the public media has picked up on this rumor. So apparently there's been this rumor for years that the street coffee vendors who sell coffee for really low price are not selling you totally coffee. It's like some of it's coffee, some of it's fillers, and then they're putting coffee additives. So this has been just a rumor, and then his eyebrows perked up when the wider media picked up on it. He's like, now I feel like we have to kind of research this. And I'm like, I have no idea how you would test that. And he's like, oh, I do. He's like, I have the whole test regime set up. And so he ran 2 articles on this. So first was on the test regimen. And then the second, he got on his scooter and went around and got 22 samples from all around Ho Chi Minh City and then tested them. So on the one hand, this is citizen science. So the titration test that he was doing, we had a bunch of people that do titration testing get into the comments and be like, this is not quite the right way to do it. You should try this. You should analyze your data a little bit differently in this way. And so when he did the follow-up, he had some value added there. But I think there's actually room for us to do an article in the future where we work with the people who are in there commenting about it to come up with a more ironclad test and see if we can come up with anything else. But the moral of the story is it looks like the coffee is either purely coffee or has such small amounts of additives that you can't tell a difference in it. But I think it's a really interesting way to approach the problem of rumors being reported in the media. If you have a Nexus 5X, which I do in my pocket right now, which is mysteriously having horrible battery problems the last couple of days, you wonder to yourself, am I going to have a boot loop problem? So the main processor on these phones I believe it comes delaminated over time and use, and so a lot of people get stuck with like, oh, I had all these pictures that I wasn't syncing, or in Lewin's case, he had just recorded a bunch of videos that weekend and didn't upload them anywhere. And so he's like, hey, there's all these different rumors on how you get your data off of these phones. Can I give them a try? And I'm like, yeah, it's probably easier before you actually go and desolder the chips and try to get your data off of those. So he did like the freezer test and blowing on it with a hot air gun, ended up getting his data off there. So I guess some of those dubious recovery methods do work. And you know, we always love the hacks. This one's a daily that we covered where someone's like, I made my own nuclear battery. I think this is Nerd Rage. Does anybody know for sure? I think it was Nerd Rage video. So this is a nuclear battery right here. It's like, I don't know, it's the size of a deck of cards or something. So what he did is he got, is it tritium? You got tritium vials that you just buy freely on the internet, and they glow. They're radioactive, they glow, and then they're sandwiched with a solar cell, so nuclear battery. Pretty awesome stuff. So we still do love to cover the hacks. That's kind of our bread and butter, along with all the other stuff that we've been doing. It's become really apparent this year that the Hackaday community wants engineering challenges. So people are always looking for things to build and new things to learn, and they want us to kind of put out there like, what is an interesting challenge? Give me something, I need an idea. And so we did a ton of that over the last year. We brought the Hackaday SciFi contest back. This is really popular. I think we first did it maybe in 2014. But a ton of people got into engineering. Like there's a whole generation of engineers who got into it because of like the stuff that they saw in Star Trek. And so no matter whether you're young or old, if you're into building stuff, oftentimes you want to build the fanciful things that you saw in sci-fi. And so just putting this out there, we had a ton of people that built, did I actually put examples in there? I'm not sure I put examples in here. And now I'm blanking, isn't that horrible? I remember sonic screwdrivers, and there was the robot that balances on the bowling ball. I think that was not specifically from sci-fi, but sci-fi inspired. We saw from Stargate SG-1 the masks, animated masks that people were wearing. Really ran the gamut. Very popular contest. We had a ton of fun judging it. It was great. Coming from community organized contest, this is someone on Hackaday IO is like, I have a really great idea. Can I run a contest? And we're like, what's the idea? And they're like, 1 square inch project. So you build something on a 1x1 PCB. It can be anything. We're like, that's a great idea. And so we had a very big, well-run contest. Actually, I heard Sammy Kamkar in a talk, or maybe just in talking to him earlier this year, say that he really wanted to be part of this contest, but he found out about it after the contest, and so, but he built it anyway. And I think it's either on his website or Hackaday IO. So this one's something that really has legs, and I think it'd be a great idea to bring it back at some time. It'd be a lot of fun. Adam Fabio came up with the 1 Kilobyte Contest, which is like, what can you do in 1 KB of compiled code? And so that means like any libraries that you use have to be in there. Everything 1 KB is the limit. And we saw a huge number of things come out of that. And there's a whole library on Hackaday IO. Go look at those. And of course, Hackaday Prize, which we awarded the grand prize and 2nd through 5th place and the best product last night. We saw over 1,000 entries this year. We saw a big increase in the number of teams that are working on projects together. This one's really good. So the other ones are fun. The other ones push engineering forward, and I think that's really great, especially if we look at engineering challenges that are common. Like I really liked Google's power density challenge. So that one was like, they wanted a certain level of wattage output within a certain physical space. And if we can get more engineering challenges like this that we're getting people to work on and having success on, what we end up with are like these open source modules that other people can plug into their projects, which means you spend less time working on that really hard problem, so you can work on other really hard problems. We kind of amplify the talent and ability that we have. The other thing I like about having modules like that are open source is those themselves can be extended and made better. So I think the engineering challenges are a really good thing, and I do think we want to incorporate some of that into future efforts like the Hackaday Prize. And one of the things a lot of the Hackaday Prize judges told me this year is that they saw a lot of community contributed ideas. So writing about these projects and these efforts as you do them allows people to come in and comment, like I was talking about on the editorial stories. People that are experts in chemistry came in and talked about coffee purity. If you're building something like an underwater glider, someone that's already an expert in building autonomous underwater vehicles might come in and be like, oh, I see you're having a problem with the seals on that, and I had that same problem, and here's how we did it. Time and again, hearing from the judges on interviewing them for the videos last night, they said this progress along the way really helps evolve that project. It helps build the team because people see that there's more interest in there. So even if you're not looking to get fully involved in a project, just leaving those little hints and those breadcrumbs on how people can find answers to their solutions makes a big impact on that. And so Hackaday does love a challenge. As we're looking towards Hackaday Prize for the future, if you have ideas on what challenge rounds we might have or how we can run side initiatives to solve good engineering challenges, we depend on you for those ideas. So what problems are worth solving? What things can we build that matter? Please go ahead and, did I put an email address in there? I did. prize@hackaday.com. Please email us. We read all those emails, and we love the input. On Hackaday.com, we are working on some self-improvement efforts this year. So I've been talking most of this time about all the input from the community, and the overwhelming number of comments on our articles are positive. We see people that oftentimes were involved in the original engineering projects when we're talking about history that pop in and talk about that, or experts in fields pop in and talk about that. But occasionally we do have bad actors in the comments. And this year we've noticed it's not so much there's more bad comments, but some of the comments have become more and more intolerant. And we really cannot tolerate intolerance. We want to have a place that is safe and a place that is a great place to go and learn and become part of a team. And when we see intolerant comments, that does the opposite of that. Intolerance is divisive. It breaks down a community. It has a net effect of silencing the productive conversations. And that is really, we see intolerance come in political, racial, gender, or sexual orientation. There's many ways that it can come. It can come at different levels. But the point is, it's the opposite of what Hackaday stands for. It's the opposite of what the open hardware and open source software movements stand for. And so we've been working really hard on that, especially over the last several months, and we will moving forward. We want to be an inclusive place. And so when we encounter these intolerant comments, our first reaction, other than taking them down, putting them into a moderation queue and talking about them, is to reach out to the person that made them. We could go about it by just saying every time we see an intolerant comment, we're going to ban that person. But the thing is, what we'd like is for that person to realize that what they're saying is an intolerant thing, and that it's not a good way to behave, and that it doesn't build a community, and then give them some examples on ways that they could behave differently and contribute to building a community. So a big part of our effort is reaching out to those bad actors and seeing if we can work to them to welcome them in the community. If we can't, then we can go other routes, like banning that person, doing increased moderation on that person, trying to work with that person more. But I think the point is, people should feel like they have a voice and that they can comment, and when they do comment, they're going to receive productive comments that help build up what they're talking about and not things that break them down. You can obviously help on this. I think the biggest thing is just be the blueprint for what productive commenting is like. So when you see a good article and you think it's really well written, lead with that. Hey, great article. Then when you have something to add, say, I did something like this before and ran into the same problems. It's really not that hard to build a great community when you have people doing that. If we are all able to kind of have this productive and constructive conversation together, I think people will look at that and they will follow the example, and we'll see an amplifying effect there. And of course, report comments. So we actually get a lot more emails of people saying, "Oops, I accidentally clicked report comment," than we do reported comments. So it's always better for you to report a comment. If you report a comment by accident, it's fine. The report comments link just puts it into a moderation so that a human can look at it and be like, what's going on here? What should I take care of? So never be afraid to use that. I think it makes it a better place. Here we go. People with great knowledge and skill have the power to learn and teach. So we really must build each other up. We must encourage science and technology, progress in science and technology, and we must make the world a better place. I want to bring this book up. So my friend Chris Gamble recommended this book, and I blew through it in I don't know, 6 days or something. It's an amazing book called The Innovation Factory by John Gertner. And it's about the history of Bell Labs, and it follows a bunch of different scientists from that time. And I knew about almost all of them. I knew about almost all of the accomplishments that they had done, but this book humanized them in a way that I'd never seen before. So it's really worth a read. But the biggest thing that I took away from that is the way that they were sharing knowledge. And so one of the big things was, if you worked there, you were encouraged to work on a project that was outside of your discipline. And so they had interdisciplinary teams, which is really cool, which allows, if all the engineers are hitting their head on the same problem, having someone that isn't a specialist in that field look at it might give you the insight that you need. They also had weekly Friday, basically unconferences. They had weekly Friday lectures where you could go and learn about stuff, and then they were traveling to other countries and other companies and talking about the processes and research that they were doing. And it's really a good platform for saying, hey, don't cloister that knowledge. Get that knowledge out there, let other people work on it. We've seen a lot of success in this at Hackaday. We have a weekly meetup called the Hack Chat. You can join Hackaday, go to the Hack Chat meetup room. We bring in an expert in a field every week, usually at noon on Fridays, Pacific time, and have them talk about it. We have had so many, I can't really go into listing every one of them. Hopefully you can read some of them here. I remember the magnetization was really awesome. Buddy Huang was in a Hack Chat. Actually, Jordan Bunker, is he here? Jordan Bunker, who's doing a lot of work on Hackaday IO with us, wrote a great kind of narrative overview of that. We have some of those out there, but for all of these, there are transcripts. So if you want to go through and read what people were talking about before, that's a great place to do it, but there's no substitute for being there live and kind of participating in the back and forth and question asking. Give it a try. I think you'll love it. We're also always looking for hosts of that. So if you have something you're really excited about, we want to be excited about it too. Contact us, and we maybe can set up a hack chat with you. Skipping that slide. All right, so we have the power to share hard-fought gains. The thing I hate is when knowledge and hard work is lost. And so that's really the power of open, right? If we can publish it openly, we can get more people to know about it and be able to use it and be productive with it. But there becomes an issue of like, how is that discoverable, and can you trust that knowledge? And so we're happy to announce a new initiative that we're just starting this year. It looks to make knowledge more available. It looks to make it available for small shops to solve interesting problems and to build products that change life and change the world in amazing ways. I think one of the biggest problems you have if you're like the only hardware person on a project is what's the next thing I need to know to see this through? And if I don't know that, how long is it going to take me to learn it? And am I going to find out halfway through learning it that it's too large in scale and I should have just hired someone? And so we're announcing the Hackaday Journal of What You Didn't Know. This is a peer-reviewed journal of white papers that will be published twice a year. When we've been working on this, one of the things that popped to mind, I was talking to Mike Harrison, who designed the badge you're wearing and gave the talk last night about LCD screens. Early on in the design process, he suggested, hey, why don't we use a custom segment LCD for these badges? Now, that's really scary. Have you ordered a custom? Has anyone here ordered a custom segment LCD before? Nobody. Mike, have you ordered a custom segment? Even Mike hasn't done it. So what we need is a white paper from someone that's done it that says, these are the things that you're going to get into. These are the things that I didn't know before that were really difficult. These are some of the people that you might go to for advice on that. These are some of the companies that are available. And maybe here's some alternatives that you should think about and decide if it could work before you go down this rabbit hole. And that's just one for manufacturing. I mean, I could see all kinds of these, like here's existing equipment that has not been used in this way before, and we built this amazing software infrastructure to make it do something different so that you don't have to order a custom piece of hardware. And the thing about this is, if we can get people who have done this, people who have some expertise in this to write this paper, and then we can find people who have also gone through a similar process to peer review that paper and then put it into a journal twice a year, this gets both that, how do you discover it, and how do you trust it? And then, of course, in keeping with the ideals that we believe in the free and open sharing of information and ideas, these papers would be open source and available online to all. So if you have any interest in being in the Hackaday's Journal of What You Don't Know, or peer reviewing for it, or just saying, hey, I really need this topic, it's becoming more important and there's nowhere you can learn about it, like I said at the beginning of the talk, we depend on you to tell us what is most important. Please join this project, and we can add you to the team and start an idea engine to go and really build something great out of this journal. I think every time we take something new on, I'm giddy with the possibilities, and every time we do it, I'm amazed at how much further we go than my expectations were. So join us in this effort. I think it is really big, and it's the next step in Hackaday's evolution. It's amazing to look back each year and see what's been accomplished, and I'm always surprised at how we accomplished more than we did. The biggest part of that is because everyone that's working on Hackaday is an amazingly competent person. And I think that's one of the hardest things in the world to find is competency. If you ask someone to do something, if you need someone to do something in the Hackaday crew, it happens. It happens at an incredibly high level. This conference is a great thing to look at. If you look at the publishing schedule that runs every 3 hours, no matter rain, nor sleet, nor hail, nor lightning, nor server outage on Hackaday.com. And if you look at the ability for Hackaday IO to start from 0 in 2014 and end up at 256,000 people hosting weekly hack chats, hosting huge contests, they're doing great good to build something that matters in the world. The people that have built and maintained Hackaday IO have done an amazing job. The final thing, of course, I've said it before, is you. So the Hackaday community is incredibly special. We would be nowhere without you. So please, share what you're doing, tell people about the learning, tell people about your failings, welcome people in, use your knowledge to build them up, and together we will make a great world. Thank you. Long live Hackaday.